Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook video. August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day, and to talk about her own personal journey regarding overdose and loss is Denise Williams. Denise, thanks for coming via Zoom and talking with me today. I appreciate you taking the time and willingness to share your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's a very important topic.
So I want you to start, if you don't mind, talking to me about your sons, your twin boys, Matt and Ryan, and just kind of walk me through their life, their story.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about them.
Well, they are twins. They were born in 1985. They were both very good kids. They got good grades in school, never got into any serious trouble or anything like that. During the high school years, we did notice Matt was, I think I called him twice coming home late at night and intoxicated, which after talking to a lot of friends, I thought, wow, that's great. Most kids come home every weekend. I was only aware of it twice. I didn't have those issues with Ryan. Ryan was an athlete and a superior athlete. And it was more important for him to maintain what he needed to run the race, because they had a lot of the races even on the weekends and stuff like that. So he didn't go to as many of the parties or anything that Matt did.
Gotcha.
But even through, only catching him twice in high school intoxicated, Matt still maintained good grades. He played golf for the high school. He played football, played lacrosse, but his passion was music. He loved music. He even asked to take piano lessons outside of school because they didn't offer it in school, but he played the guitar, he played the violin, he played the clarinet, and he even did a little bit of writing. And then he also had a little garage band, which, of course, he had big dreams that they were going to go far. But I did not think that my life was bad at that time. I thought it was pretty good. Ryan ended up going on to college and he was first team All-American for cross country in the junior colleges. Matt went on outside of high school and he worked during the day full time at his father's business and went to college at night. And then on weekends, he spent the weekends with his girlfriend. And, I thought we were the picture perfect scenario. And then all of a sudden, about a year and a half after their graduation, Matt took a different turn. He quit college, he broke up with the girlfriend, it was obvious, and so he was home on weekends and I was seeing his activity versus before when he was going away to the college, I wasn't seeing what he was doing.
Gotcha.
And he was coming in, and Matt was a very quiet person and a people kind of pleaser. So for him to come in at 3:00 in the morning and falling into the wall and knocking pictures over, totally out of character,
Right.
From what I thought, was, his personality was more like. So, I mean, we talked to him a couple times and said, okay, this can't go on. You're 19 years old. If you can't live in our house, under
Right.
our rules, the whole stuff.
Yeah, these are the rules as a parent. This is,
right.
You're a young adult, but here's the deal with living.
Right. If you're going to come in and disrupt it, I got to get up and go to work, and so
Right.
does everybody else. So,
Right.
you can't come in disruptive. Did I think I was going to keep him from drinking? No, I wasn't that naive. But I thought he needed to watch his own thing. Plus, I was worried about the drinking and driving. Well, one day he had spent the night out and he came in and it was a different kind. It wasn't an alcohol high or a pot high, which were the two things that I thought he was involved in. And he admitted that he had a cocaine problem.
Wow.
I myself am so naive, and I didn't know it. And I said, do you need help? And he said, no. He goes, I spent all my savings, so I can't do drugs anymore because I have no money. So me not understanding drugs, okay, no money, no drugs, good. We're good.
We're finished. That's over.
Finished, end of story. Well, it wasn't the end of story. That happened in October. In January the following year, I get a phone call at 4:15 in the morning from University of Maryland Shock Trauma. Matt had been in a car accident. And I needed to come immediately. They were getting ready to do emergency surgery on him. And they couldn't give me any details over the phone because he was over 18. But we got up there, he was in pretty bad shape. It wasn't life-threatening, but he did break, dislocate, crushed every bone in his left arm. And then he had a broken leg and lacerations, bruised, normal ribs and things like that. But then I got introduced to something that he never did well with. When he had his wisdom teeth pulled and all, he could never take opiates. They were giving him high amounts. Later down the road, Matt admitted by 2 months after the car accident, he was craving more. It was like he instantly went from vomiting to I'm not getting enough. And he was getting more and more mobile then, and his friends were picking him up and they were going out. And he said he was subsidizing pills on the street because he didn't have access to the ones that were in the house. And by the 1-year anniversary of his car accident, he had a $200 a day habit over and above what he was getting from the doctors. And that's when he switched to heroin. And then getting into Ryan, it was some, through his college years, you knew that, when school was on hiatus, you would see him a little tipsy, and I knew he was smoking pot, but it wasn't anything more than that. And then it would just abruptly stop when he knew he had to get back into training for races. And then by the end of his, when he was getting ready to graduate, he was in his final semester, he met a girl. She ended up pregnant, and Ryan wanted to do the right thing. He wanted, the whole picket fence to give, he dropped out of college at that point, which really, 5 credits to go and you drop out of school. Doesn't make any sense. But he got himself into financial debt, trying to make everything perfect for his new family. And with it came pills. And of course, he could go right to his brother, who could supply them. And that's ultimately how Ryan's problem started.
Did you have any idea at that point that they were co-supporting each other in their addiction?
No, because they actually, Ryan, in front of us, he would say, I don't want to talk to Matt, because I think Ryan knew before the rest of us that Matt was shooting heroin, and Matt had crossed over that line, and he couldn't why couldn't you just stay with oxys and Percocets? You cross that line.
Right.
So he wasn't saying, well, I'm doing what Matt was doing a year ago. He just stopped talking to Matt because of where Matt was. But from that point on, it was in and out of rehab.
For both of them?
For both, but never at the same time. And that's, when you're still feeding off of each other's addiction, and things that I didn't know then, that, just because Matt went to rehab, the minute he saw Ryan high, I didn't understand that was a trigger for Matt, and vice versa. And I could never get them in to rehab at the same. Well, I didn't know either.
Right.
So I can't say that it wasn't as though I couldn't get them. I really didn't understand that they both needed to go away at the same time, because they were feeding off of each other and they were triggers for each other. they were more aware of this whole trigger thing between the two of them. So Ryan said, well, I'm going to stay at Katie's house, my daughter's house. He goes, and that way I'm not doing anything to your sobriety. And he goes, and come right after Christmas. He goes, as soon as I get the whole Santa thing done with Gavin, I'm going to. So he did that, and I respected Ryan for doing that, because he was still using, not as much, because my daughter wouldn't have allowed him in her house with her children. She had 2 by then, and he had his own son on weekends. So he tried to just hibernate, if he couldn't get a hold of a Suboxone on the street. So, as promised, his court date was the first week of January, and we went and we met with his lawyer, and she asked him about treatment, and he said, well, when we leave here, he goes, I promised my mother and my brother, and I owe it to myself, I'm going into treatment as soon as they allow me. And she suggested inpatient, but my husband had just recently had strokes and I needed help. So we knew Matt was going to be going away again, and Ryan had the lesser of the charges. So Ryan was just going to have to do outpatient. So we left the courthouse after meeting his lawyer. We went right to social services. Ryan got pre-approved for state insurance. And then we drove right to that. It was the same place that Matt was going for outpatient treatment. And he was told that day they don't take walk-ins, and they set him up for an appointment for the following week, which he went back the following week. And he told them that he had pending insurance, that he had been pre-approved, but nobody from the facility looked on their website, which they should have done. They told him, come back when you have your card in hand. Ryan died 25 days later. And since then, I've gotten a law passed that any facility that accepts state insurance, they have to go on that website, because through my investigation, he was approved that day, and even in his file, it said needs treatment immediately. So anyway, his card came 2 days after his death. And then Matt was scheduled for his sentencing hearing the day after Ryan's funeral. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm burying one son one day, and the next day the other one will be taken away from me in handcuffs. So I called the prosecuting attorney, and she was as hard-nosed as she was to get Matt, the charges to stick with Matt. She was very sympathetic and called all the parties involved and said, don't worry, we're going to fix this. Well, Matt stayed clean for 2.5 years after that. And then it was right around the 2nd year anniversary of Ryan's passing. He was having a hard time. He had never gotten help. And that was at the end of January. And then like the next 2 weeks, if we had talked around our household, maybe things could be different today. He was doing things out of character. Like he went one day when I was at work and he sat down with his father, who he had a lot of issues with, and just told him how sorry he was about everything that's happened, and hugged and kissed him. And he said, but don't tell mom. He goes, she's going to think I'm a sissy, and so he didn't come to me. Then the night before he passed, it was obvious he was having issues here, and him and I talked, and I was trying to keep an eye on him, and then he did sneak out. I heard him pulling away, but he was only gone for a short period of time. I didn't think he was gone long enough to get drugs, and the minute he walked in, I patting him down, checking every place that he's ever hid drugs before. I took away his phone. I checked that. There wasn't anything on there, where he had made a phone call. And I took his car keys. And I'm like, come on, Matt, what's going on? You're just not right. Did you ever get the blood work? And he told me no. And then I'm not going to. I will not do it. And then that's when he told me, he goes, Mom, you got to know when it's time. And it's my time. When I cannot be fixed, I will never be fixed. I will never forgive myself for Ryan. And it's time for you to just accept letting me go. And I'm like, Matt, I'm calling 911. I'm calling crisis response. And he said, go ahead. I've got the right to say no. It's my life. You have to know when. And I said, well, will you please go back in to treatment? And this was on a Saturday night. And he said, yeah, but I'm not going. And finally he agreed. He goes, yes, I'll go, but I'm not going now. And I'm like, why? You need to be seen now. And he said, they don't do anything on weekends, which he was right. They don't.
Right.
You can only have mental health Monday through Friday.
Right, Monday through Friday, yeah.
So he said, I'll go in Monday morning. And then, because I'm not going to, sit for a day and a half feeling sorry for myself when I'm more comfortable here. I can pack some clothes. And so I accepted that. And then unbeknown to me, he called his sister right after that. And he said, I want to see the boys first thing in the morning. Can you bring them all over? And she said, sure. I'm coloring Mom's hair. I'll be over anyway. And he goes, no, you got to come early. And so she got here early, which, I wasn't expecting her until like in the afternoon to color my hair. And she went right to Matt's room and came out. She goes, he's in a bad way. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, but it's okay. He's going tomorrow into treatment. She goes, oh. And she goes, well, he called me. And it's like, well, he probably went to say goodbye to the boys because he probably, in mental health facilities, children aren't allowed. He probably won't see him for, probably be in there for 30 days or so. And she said, yeah, I guess you're right. And then I went about doing stuff and she went back down and talked to him. And then all of a sudden she's back up in the kitchen because his bedroom was in the basement. And she said, Mom. And I came down and I'm like, what? She goes, Matt's down there using. Either you go down there and you call 911 or I am. One of us is going to take care of him. When I got down there, he was gone. Like I said, he had attempted suicide several times, but he's 8 times actually over the years. But he always changed his mind at the last minute and called for help. But his autopsy showed he had a massive heart attack too. So we don't know if he would have changed his mind and the heart attack prevented. But
Denise,
3 years and 20 days later.
I'm so sorry. I so appreciate you sharing. That's just such a...
It's too many things that could have... It didn't have to be. Either one of them. Right. Either one of them. Laws have to change.
Yeah.
A parent, if just because their child is 18 years old in one day, doesn't mean they stop being a parent and they can't do anything.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling. You are so right. I, if I were in person right now, I'd have my arm on, and it wasn't COVID, I would have my arm on you and just, so I'm just doing that virtually. No, I know I'm sending you some positive energy virtually
I
because
appreciate it.
what do you feel? I mean, clearly there's so many glitches in the system
Yeah.
and just so many parts that are broken. But from a parent perspective, I think it's really important if you could share what do you think is one of the biggest misunderstandings or misconceptions about substance use disorder and addiction?
They're just that it's a choice.
Yeah,
Well, initially it is, 10 kids go to a high school underage drinking party. 5 of them come home with this ball rolling because they're genetically predisposed.
right.
And the other 5, they'll just go out again and ultimately nothing will happen.
I agree with you. I think that is for most people, that's the biggest. Well, they chose to, nobody's telling them they have to do this, but you're right. They're with their friend whose brain is wired differently and it doesn't affect them the same way. So that becomes a real challenge to try and combat that.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Like I work with like the haunted house of addiction, and they usually have me at the end because I do bring up Ryan and Matt. And half the time I'm talking to students, half the time I'm talking to parents. And when the talk comes to the parents, it is check your genetics. It isn't there is no such thing as they're just going through a phase anymore. The
Right.
thoughts today are different. We know more about addiction and substance misuse. If you have old Uncle Ernie who gets drunk every Thanksgiving, guess what? It's probably in your household, in your family tree. You need to be aware of it. And I, I wasn't, and it is in my family
Right.
tree. So is mental health, and and
And
they
those two are,
so linked together.
yes,
And
yes.
even if somebody like Ryan went into the whole addiction thing with, I don't think with the mental health, Matt obviously did. So it escalated even larger that even if he had lived, he would have struggled the rest of his life with mental health. There's no question. Where Ryan, had he lived, he probably, would have walked away and eventually his brain would have healed.
Right.
And I get, because of me having the twins and seeing both
The
sides,
two different, right.
there are two paths, and
Yeah.
you have to be aware of them.
Yeah. But is there something that has, through your journey through the last few years, that has really resonated or helped you?
Actually, it was coming to a Chesapeake Life Center, and I had to be talked into it. It was actually one of Ryan and Matt's friends who married another one of their friends, and he overdosed like maybe a year or so before Ryan. And his wife went there, and after losing Ryan and Matt, who the wife, the widow, she felt the loss too because she knew Ryan and Matt from school and through her husband. And she told Katie, why don't you guys go? And Katie, my daughter, would bring it up, and it's like, no, I don't need to lay out on a sofa, because that was I was stereotyping counseling. So anyway, she finally, I didn't attend until it was maybe 5 months after Ryan had passed, when I finally went to a private there. And here I thought I was just going to go there talking about Ryan, and my daughter went with me. It was supposed to be, she said she would stay, but it opened, they had to say, okay, time's up,
Time's up.
because it was like talking about, what Matt was going through,
Right.
my husband having the stroke and what that did to, it was like,
There's a lot. Right.
uh,
The floodgates, I'm sure.
right. And I stayed with just the privates for several months. And then I think when Susan thought that I was ready, that I was able to take a breath. She said, I have a group, and at first I'm like, yeah, because I kept thinking was the parent who lost a child to cancer. It's like, nah. And she goes, no, there are people just, or going through exactly what you are. Mm-hmm. And I reluctantly went, and it was one of the most positive things I've done for myself in the grieving process. Okay. We all have different stories in a way, but we all hit those brick walls. We all have been stigmatized. We all feel like we can't openly talk about our loss. And it's been good for me. And I've gotten some good friendships out of it.
That's awesome. Denise, I am so appreciative of you sharing. I really am. I know it's personal and it's hard. And I just appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank oh, that's the picture. Oh my gosh, that's such a good picture of your boys. Oh, thank you. That is such a good picture. Thank you. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, for watching, and definitely thank the John and Cathy Belcher Institute for their generous support of the community education programs here at Hospice of the Chesapeake. Thanks.